Officer humiliates black man on the street, unknowingly his new commander. Anthony Johnson was standing on the sidewalk waiting for his driver when he felt a heavy hand on his shoulder. Turning around, he faced a middle-aged officer staring at him with suspicion. "What are you doing just standing here?" asked Sergeant Richard Miller, not even bothering to greet him. Anthony took a deep breath. It wasn't the first time this had happened, but this time would be different. "Very different. I'm waiting for my driver," Anthony replied calmly. "Your driver?" Richard let out a mocking laugh. "You expect me to believe that? A guy like you with a private driver?" The situation was about to escalate when Richard pointed his finger in Anthony's face, shouting loud enough for everyone on the street to hear. "I know your type. Loitering in front of fancy buildings waiting for an opportunity. Where's your ID?" Anthony remained composed as he pulled out his wallet. But Richard didn't even glance at the documents, continuing to humiliate the man in front of dozens of bystanders. "Move along. This isn't the place for you to stand around," Richard ordered. "Sergeant, you didn't even check my ID," said Anthony. "I don't need to. 30 years on the force, I know who doesn't belong here." Just then, an elderly woman who had been watching approached. "Sergeant, you're being very rude to this young man," said Mrs. Margaret, a neighborhood resident for 40 years. "Stay out of this, ma'am. I'm doing my job," and Richard snapped. Anthony put his ID away and looked steadily at Richard. "Sergeant Miller, right?" "I'll remember you," he said before walking away. "Go ahead and remember. Next time I see you around here, it won't just be talk," Richard shouted. Anthony walked to the corner where his driver had finally arrived. He got into the car under the curious stares of pedestrians. "Sorry for the delay, Doctor," said Michael, the driver. "It's fine, Michael. Take me home, please." During the ride, Anthony reflected on what had just happened. At 42, with a law degree and a specialization in public safety, he had dedicated his life to fighting exactly this kind of behavior. And now, about to take command of the precinct, he had been publicly humiliated by one of his future subordinates. Arriving home in the Upper East Side of New York City, Anthony was greeted by his wife, Melissa. "Honey, are you okay?" "You look upset," Melissa asked, noticing her husband's expression. "It happened again, Melissa. This time it was a police sergeant." Melissa hugged her husband. After 20 years of marriage, she knew well the pain Anthony carried. "You take command on Monday, right?" she asked. "Yes. And the worst part is, the sergeant who humiliated me is part of the precinct." "Anthony, this could be an opportunity, a chance to make a difference." But Anthony was tired of having to prove his worth, tired of being judged by the color of his skin. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now back to the story. The next day, Anthony decided to visit his mother, Mrs. Grace, in the East Side of New York City neighborhood where he grew up. "Son, you look troubled. What happened?" Grace asked as she opened the door. Anthony told her everything as they shared coffee in her small kitchen. "Son, do you remember when your father went through this?" Grace's eyes were moist. He was an officer too, and he suffered too. But he never stopped believing things could change. "Mom, sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. I studied so hard, worked so hard, and I'm still treated like the suspect." "It is worth it, Anthony. Every small change you make will impact so many lives." That afternoon, Anthony received a call from Colonel Thompson, his superior. "Anthony, I heard about yesterday's incident. I'm very sorry." "How did you find out, Colonel?" "Videos of what happened are circulating on social media. Sergeant Miller didn't know who you were." "That shouldn't matter, Colonel. He shouldn't treat anyone that way." "I completely agree. That's why I chose you to command that battalion. It needs urgent changes." After hanging up, Anthony spent hours watching the videos circulating online. The comments were divided. Some supported the sergeant's actions, others condemned the obvious prejudice. On Sunday, the day before assuming command, Anthony gathered his trusted team at his home. Major Samantha Cooper, Captain Robert Wilson, and Lieutenant Ann Parker were officers who shared his vision of a more humane police force. "The battalion has serious issues with improper conduct," explained Samantha, showing troubling statistics. "Sergeant Miller is one of the most problematic," added Robert. He has dozens of complaints but has always been protected. We need to proceed carefully, Anne cautioned. He has many allies in the battalion. Anthony knew it wouldn't be easy. Changing an entrenched institutional culture would require patience and strategy. Monday arrived with a light rain falling. Over New York City, Anthony put on his impeccable uniform and looked at himself in the mirror. Melissa adjusted his tie. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You'll make a difference, I know." "I hope so, love, I hope so." When he arrived at the battalion, Anthony was greeted by the outgoing command. The change of command ceremony was set for 10 a.m., but he arrived early to tour the facilities. Walking through the halls, he noticed curious glances from the officers. Some whispered among themselves. In the meeting room, the senior officers were already gathered. Richard Miller was among them, chatting animatedly with other sergeants. "Attention," announced the major conducting the ceremony. Everyone stood as Anthony entered the room. Richard's eyes widened when he recognized the man he had humiliated 3 days earlier. "Gentlemen, I present your new battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Johnson." The silence in the room was deafening. Richard paled, his hands trembling slightly. Anthony walked to the podium and looked at each person present. "Good morning, everyone. I take command of this battalion with the mission to transform it into a model of excellence and respect for human rights." Richard swallowed hard. His colleagues beside him noticed his nervousness. "Before we proceed, I'd like to share something. That happened to me this past Friday." Anthony kept his tone calm. "I was subjected to improper and humiliating treatment by an officer from this battalion." Murmurs spread through the room. Richard looked like he wished the ground would swallow him. "The officer in question didn't know me, that's true. But that doesn't justify the treatment I received. If he treated me that way, imagine how many citizens have endured the same humiliation." Sergeant Davis, a close friend of Richard's, tried to defend him. "Commander, with all due respect, Sergeant Miller has 30 years of good service." "Sergeant Davis, good service doesn't include humiliating citizens," Anthony replied firmly. "But I'm not here to punish anyone for the past. I'm here to build a better future." After the meeting, Richard tried to approach Anthony. "Commander, I didn't know. Sergeant Miller, I want to see you in my office in 1 hour," Anthony said without looking at him. Richard endured the longest hour of his life. His colleagues tried to console him, but he knew his career might be over. The commanders. "Going to ruin you, Richard," said Sergeant Roberts. "You humiliated him in front of everyone. I didn't know it was him." Richard was desperate. "And if you had known, would you have acted differently?" asked Sergeant Rita, one of the few women in the battalion. "That's the problem, Richard." When he finally entered the commander's office, Richard was sweating bullets. "Have a seat, Sergeant," said Anthony, without looking up from the documents he was reading. "Commander, I want to apologize for the—" "Sergeant, how many people have you approached like that?" Anthony interrupted. Richard fell silent. "I'm looking at your record here. 43 formal complaints for inappropriate conduct. 18 specifically mention racial discrimination." "Sir, I can explain." "No need. I know exactly what you're going to say. That you were just doing your job. That experience taught you to spot suspects, that you never meant to discriminate against anyone." Richard nodded, surprised by the accuracy. "Sergeant, do you have a family?" "Yes, sir. A wife and 2 kids." "How would you feel if someone treated your son the way you treated me?" Richard lowered his head. His oldest son, Brian, was 20 and studying engineering. "I'd be furious, sir." "Then why do you think it's acceptable to do that to someone else's child?" The silence in the room was heavy. Anthony stood up and walked to the window. "Sergeant, I'm giving you a choice. Either you agree to undergo retraining and change your approach, or you'll face disciplinary action for all these complaints." "Retraining, sir?" "Yes. Human rights training, psychological counseling, community service. A 6-month intensive program." Richard hadn't expected that. He'd expected punishment, maybe even expulsion from the force. "Why are you giving me this chance?" "Because I believe people can change, Sergeant. But they have to want to change. I accept." "Commander, and I'm sorry, truly. Your apology will only matter when your behavior changes, Sergeant. dismissed. As he left the office, Richard found dozens of colleagues waiting in the hallway. "So, did he nail you?" asked Roberts. "No, he gave me a chance." The news spread quickly through the battalion. Some thought Anthony was being weak, others saw wisdom in his decision. In the following weeks, Anthony implemented significant changes. He set up weekly meetings with the community, mandatory training on respectful conduct, and created a direct channel for complaints. Richard began his retraining. On the first day, he resisted every activity. "This is a waste of time," he grumbled during a session on unconscious bias. "Sergeant Miller, you're here by choice," reminded psychologist Dr. Mary Sullivan. But something began to shift when Richard was assigned to community service at a cultural center in the neighborhood where Anthony grew up. "Sergeant." "Richard," a familiar voice called out. It was Mrs. Grace, Anthony's mother, who ran activities for seniors at the center. I'm your commander's mother, and you're going to help me with today's activities." Richard spent the afternoon serving coffee and listening to the seniors' stories. Many shared experiences of discrimination and police brutality. "You know, son," said old Jack, a 78-year-old man, "I've been arrested 3 times in my life. Never for a crime. Always for being in the wrong place with the wrong skin color." The words hit Richard hard. He began to see faces and stories where he'd once only seen suspects. Meanwhile, Anthony faced resistance from part of the battalion. Captain Reynolds led a group that subtly undermined the changes. "This commander wants to turn us into social workers," Reynolds complained. "Cops have to command respect." "Respect is earned, Captain," replied Lieutenant Ann Parker, "not forced through fear." Tensions grew. Some officers skipped training, others participated half-heartedly. Melissa noticed the toll it was taking on her husband. "Anthony, you're losing weight. You're not sleeping well." "It's harder than I imagined, Melissa. The resistance is enormous." "Change takes time, love. You knew it wouldn't be easy." One night, Anthony received an urgent call. A serious incident had occurred. A young black man had been assaulted during a police stop. The one responsible, one of the officers from Captain Reynolds' unit. Anthony went to the hospital himself to check on the young man. "Commander?" The young man, Ryan, was surprised to see the high-ranking officer at his bedside. "How are you?" "Ryan. Hurt, but alive. They said I was a suspect." "A suspect of what?" "Coming home from college." Ryan's mother, Mrs. Mary, was crying in the corner of the room. "My son is a medical student, Commander. He's never had trouble with the law. Why did they do this to him?" Anthony promised a thorough investigation and justice, but he knew this incident could undo all his work. The next day, he called an emergency meeting. "What happened yesterday is exactly what we're trying to eradicate," Anthony said. "The officer responsible will be suspended and face criminal charges." "Commander, Officer Smith claimed resistance," Captain Reynolds defended. "Captain, there's video showing clear excessive force. We won't tolerate this kind of conduct anymore." "With all due respect, Commander," Reynolds raised his voice, "you're weakening the force." "No, Captain, I'm strengthening it. A police force respected by the community is far stronger than one feared." The argument grew heated. Some supported Reynolds, others stood with Anthony. "You want to know the truth?" Richard, who had been silent, suddenly stood up. "I was one of the worst. I humiliated people for decades, thinking I was right. You know what I realized? I was destroying lives and staining the badge I swore to honor." Everyone was surprised by Richard's intervention. The commander could have ended my career. Instead, he gave me the chance to become the officer I should have been from the start. I've learned more in 2 months than in 30 years. Richard's words had an impact, but Reynolds wasn't convinced. "Miller's become the commander's yes man," he whispered to his allies. But Richard wasn't alone. Other officers began, sharing experiences from the retraining program. "I realized my way of stopping people was traumatizing kids," Corporal Martinez confessed. "I learned the difference between firmness and brutality," Officer Beth added. Anthony seized the moment. "Gentlemen, I'm not asking you to be soft. I'm asking you to be professional, to treat every citizen the way you'd want your own family treated." After the meeting, Mrs. Grace called Anthony. Son, Richard told me what he did today in the meeting. He's really changing. I'm glad to hear that, Mom, but we still have a long way to go. Your father would be proud. Weeks passed and the changes began to show. Complaints against the precinct dropped by 40%. The community started cooperating more with investigations, but Reynolds and his group didn't give up. They began spreading rumors that Anthony was being soft on criminals. One day, while on patrol, Richard and his partner, young officer Luke, spotted a group of young men behaving in a way Richard would have once called suspicious. "Let's stop them," Luke said, already stepping out of the car. "Easy, officer. Let's observe first." "But Sergeant, you always used to say—" "I used to say a lot of nonsense, Luke. Look closely. They're just kids talking. What if they're planning something? What if they're just being kids? Let's drive by, keep a presence, but no unnecessary confrontation." Luke hesitated but obeyed. Minutes later, the young men dispersed naturally, each heading home. "See, no crime, just friends chatting." "Yeah, I guess you're right." But not everyone was willing to change. Captain Reynolds went to Colonel Thompson to complain about Anthony. "Colonel, the battalion is turning into a social services center. Commander Johnson is destroying police authority." "Captain, the numbers tell a different story. Crime is down, public trust is up. Numbers can be manipulated, sir." "Are you suggesting Commander Johnson is falsifying reports?" Reynolds backed down, realizing he'd gone too far. "No, sir. I just think we're losing respect on the streets." "Captain, respect based on fear isn't respect. It's tyranny. Commander Johnson has my full support." Frustrated, Reynolds decided to take matters into his own hands. He began instructing his allies to toughen their approaches, going against Anthony's orders. The situation exploded when Officer Ramirez, following Reynolds' instructions, assaulted a teenager during a stop. This time, dozens of people filmed it. Anthony went to the hospital again, but now he faced an angry crowd. "Liar, Commander! You said things would change and nothing's changed," the protesters shouted. "Please let me explain." Anthony tried to approach. "Explain what? That your officers keep beating our children?" Mrs. Carmen, a community leader, was furious. "Mrs. Carmen, that officer acted against my direct orders. He will be punished." Always the same excuse. One bad cop, one rotten apple. What about the system that produces these apples? Anthony felt the weight of failure. All his work seemed to crumble. Melissa tried to comfort him that night. "You're doing your best, Anthony. It's not enough. Reynolds is sabotaging everything and I can't prove it. What about Richard? Can't he help?" "Richard has changed, but he doesn't have enough influence. Reynolds has too many allies." The next day, Richard sought Anthony privately. "Commander, I need to speak with you. I have information about Captain Reynolds." "What kind of information?" "He's instructing officers to disobey your orders. I have recordings." Richard handed over a flash drive. It contained audio of Reynolds telling subordinates to keep the hard line and ignore the new protocols. "Why are you giving me this, Sergeant? You could face retaliation." "Because you gave me a second chance when you could have destroyed me, and because I finally understand what kind of officer I want to be." With the evidence in hand, Anthony summoned Reynolds. "Captain, you're deliberately sabotaging this command's directives. I don't know what you're talking about." Anthony played the recordings. Reynolds' face turned pale. That was obtained illegally." "Captain, you have two choices. Request a voluntary transfer or face disciplinary action for insubordination." "You can't do this. I have 25 years on the force, and you've used every one of them to uphold a system of oppression. Your choice, Captain." Reynolds stormed out, slamming the door. Within 2 hours, he requested a transfer. Reynolds' departure created a leadership vacuum among the resistors. Some remained reluctant, but without a strong figure to lead them, they began to yield. Richard was promoted to warrant officer in recognition of his transformation and courage. "Commander, I don't know if I deserve this," Richard said, emotional. "You do, warrant officer. You've proven change is possible." But the challenges continued. The community still distrusted them, and rightly so. Years of abuse don't disappear in months. Anthony organized a large integration event, officers and residents together in sports and cultural activities. At first, the tension was palpable. Many residents came only for the free food, avoiding interaction with the officers. Then little Michael, an 8-year-old boy, kicked a ball that landed at Richard's feet. "Mister, can I have my ball back?" the boy asked hesitantly. Richard knelt to be at the child's level. "Of course. You want me to show you a trick?" Michael looked at his mother, who nodded cautiously. Richard started juggling the soccer ball, drawing smiles from the boy. Soon, other children gathered. Within minutes, several officers were playing soccer with the kids. "Would you look at that?" Mrs. Margaret remarked to Grace. "I never thought I'd see this." "My son always believed it was possible," Grace replied proudly. But not everything was smooth sailing. During the event, a group of teens taunted some officers. "Look at that, the clowns pretending they care about us," said Marcus, a 19-year-old. Officer Collins, one of Reynolds' allies, nearly reacted, but Richard held him back. "Easy, officer. They have every right to be suspicious. But they're disrespecting us." "No, they're testing whether we've really changed. Prove it to them." Anthony observed everything from a distance. He watched as Richard approached the group of teens. "Boys, I get your anger. I was one of the worst. But we're trying to change." "Trying?" Marcus scoffed. "My cousin got beaten last week." "And the officer was suspended, wasn't he? Before, that wouldn't even happen." "Big deal. Suspended. He should be in jail." "I agree. The system still has a long way to go, but we have to start somewhere." The conversation drew attention. Soon, dozens of people surrounded the group. "Sergeant, you humiliated me last year," an older woman said. "Remember, in front of the market?" Richard lowered his head, ashamed. "I remember, Mrs. Rose, and I deeply regret it." "Regret doesn't erase humiliation," she said, tears in her eyes. "It doesn't, but I can promise I'll never do that again to anyone." The moment was tense. Anthony stepped forward. "Mrs. Rose, Warrant Officer Richard is in the process of changing. I know it doesn't undo the past, but—" "Commander, you're a good man," Mrs. Rose interrupted. "But you don't know what it's like to be treated like trash just because of your skin color." "You're right, I don't. That's why I need people like you to teach me." Anthony's sincerity moved many in the crowd. The event ended better than it began, but it was clear the road ahead would be long. Months passed. The retraining program expanded. Officers from other battalions came to learn about the model. Richard became one of the main instructors, using his own story as an example. "I was the kind of officer you shouldn't be," he said in lectures. "I thought the badge gave me the right to judge people by their looks." During one lecture, a veteran sergeant confronted him. "Miller, you've gone soft, forgotten what the real streets are like." "No, Sawyer. I finally learned what the real streets are. They're not enemy territory. They're where the people we swore to protect live." But the real test came when robberies spiked in the area. Pressure for results grew. "Commander, we need to crack down," Major Taylor suggested. "The community is demanding action." "Action, yes. Brutality, no," Anthony replied. "We'll increase patrols, but with respect." "With all due respect, sir, criminals don't respond to talk." "Major, suspects and criminals are different, and even criminals have rights." The operation was set. Anthony insisted on supervising personally. During one stop, Richard and Luke pulled over a car with 3 young men. "License and registration, please," Richard asked politely. The driver, visibly nervous, fumbled for his documents. "Take a deep breath," Richard said. "No need to be nervous if you've done nothing wrong." Luke noticed something suspicious in the back seat. "Sergeant," Richard saw it too, what looked like a gun wrapped in cloth. "Boys, step out of the car slowly." Tension rose. One of the teens made a move to run. "Don't!" Richard shouted. "You'll only make it worse." The young man froze. Everyone stepped out. The search revealed it was just an electric drill. "Sorry for the trouble," Richard said. "You're free to go." "Seriously?" The driver was surprised. I thought they were going to hit us." "Why would we hit you? You cooperated. You're not wanted. Have a good night." When the young men left, Luke questioned, "Sergeant, what if it had really been a gun?" "Then we would have acted appropriately. But we can't treat everyone like criminals just to be safe." The operation had mixed results. Some arrests were made, but without excesses. The community noticed the difference. Mrs. Carmen approached. "Anthony, Commander, I came to thank you. For the first time, a police operation didn't end with innocent people hurt. We still have a lot to improve, Mrs. Carmen." "Yes, but it's a start. A good start." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just getting started. Now, continuing. Recognition for Anthony's work began to spread. Local newspapers ran stories about the transformation of the battalion, but it also attracted enemies. Reynolds, now in another battalion, started a smear campaign. "Johnson is destroying the police," he said in WhatsApp groups, turning officers into social workers. The attacks gained traction when one of Anthony's officers was injured during an encounter where he tried to talk before acting. See? Reynolds exploited the case. This is what happens with this hugs not bullets policy. Anthony visited the injured officer in the hospital. "I'm sorry, Commander," Officer Adams said. "I tried to follow protocol." "You did the right thing, officer. The fault lies with the attacker, not you." "But they're saying I was weak." "Let them talk. You showed courage by trying to resolve it without violence." The incident sparked heated debate within the force. Many called for a return to the tough approach. Anthony called a meeting with the entire unit. "I know you're shaken by what happened to Adams, so am I, but we can't go backward." "Commander, what about our safety?" an officer asked. "Our safety has always been and will always be the priority, but safety doesn't mean brutality." Richard spoke up. "Folks, I spent 30 years relying on force. Know how many times I got hurt? 12. Know how many since I changed my approach? None." "Lucky you," someone shouted from the back. "It's not luck. When you treat people with respect, they tend to react better." The debate remained heated. Anthony knew he needed something more concrete. "We'll create a new safety protocol that balances caution with respect. Richard, I want you leading this task force." In the following weeks, Richard worked tirelessly with officers and security experts. "We need balance," he explained in meetings. "Protection for us, dignity for them." The new protocol was implemented, including de-escalation techniques, but also clear protective procedures. During this time, Melissa noticed changes in Anthony. "You seem lighter," she commented over dinner. "I feel like we're finally making a real difference, Melissa. Your father would be proud." Anthony got emotional. His father, also an officer, had died when he was 15, a victim of a robbery while off duty. "Sometimes I wonder what he'd say about my methods. He'd say you're honoring the badge the right way, but new challenges arose." A group of business owners, influenced by Reynolds, began complaining that the battalion had gone soft. "Ever since this commander arrived, the troublemakers have lost their fear," complained old Jack, a store owner. "Mr. Joseph, the E. Statistics show crime has dropped," Lieutenant Ann Parker replied. "Statistics are one thing, reality's another." Anthony decided to meet directly with the business owners. "Gentlemen, I understand your concerns, but I can assure you, we're more efficient than ever." "Efficient?" Mr. Anthony, another shopkeeper, was irritated. "The other day I saw your officers talking to a group of kids instead of breaking them up. And did those kids do anything wrong?" "Not yet, but they were going to." "Mr. Anthony, we can't punish people for crimes they haven't committed." The shopkeepers' resistance was strong. Some even started a petition demanding Carlos's removal. Richard decided to act. He had known many of these shopkeepers for years. "Mr. Joseph, remember when your son got caught tagging?" Richard approached him privately. "What about it?" "I could have booked him, ruined the boy's future. But I talked to him, just gave him a scare." "That's different." "Why, because your son is white, has a family?" Mr. Joseph fell silent. "The commander is only asking this, that we treat everyone's children the way I treated. For yours." Little by little, Richard spoke with each shopkeeper using personal examples. Meanwhile, Anthony faced political pressure. Conservative councilmen questioned his methods. "Commander Johnson is turning the police into an NGO," Councilman Parker declared in a speech. Anthony was summoned to City Hall for explanations. "Councilman, my work speaks for itself. A 45% reduction in complaints, 30% fewer cases, curve police violence, a 60% increase in community collaboration. Numbers can be faked, Parker insinuated. Councilman, I invite you to see our work firsthand. That's exactly what I'll do. The following week, Parker showed up at the precinct, accompanied by journalists. I want to see this new police in action. Anthony assigned Richard to accompany him on patrol. Why him? Parker was suspicious. Because Warrant Officer Richard is an example of our transformation. During the patrol, Parker kept provoking. Look over there, 3 suspicious characters. Aren't you going to stop them? Richard observed. They were workers waiting for the bus. There's nothing suspicious about them, Councilman. How do you know without checking? Experience. But the right kind now. Later, they witnessed an argument between neighbors that could have escalated. Richard calmly intervened, listened to both sides, and mediated the situation. Within minutes, they were apologizing. This isn't police work, Parker grumbled. Preventing a domestic dispute from turning violent isn't police work, Richard countered. The day ended without Parker finding material for his criticisms. But the pressure continued. Conservative groups on social media attacked Anthony daily. They're trying to wear me down, Anthony confided to Melissa. And are they succeeding? No. Every hateful message reminds me why this work is necessary. One day, Anthony received an unexpected visitor. It was Brian, Richard's son. Commander, can I speak with you? Of course, Brian, come in. I came to thank you. My father has completely changed. For the first time, I'm proud of him. Your father changed by his own merit. Brian, but you gave him the chance. You know, he used to come home complaining about people, full of anger. Now he comes home telling stories about how he helped someone. I'm happy to hear that. I'm thinking of joining the police force, but the right way. Anthony smiled. That was the real victory. Grace organized a family lunch to celebrate Anthony's first year in command. My son, how are you feeling? Tired, Mom, but fulfilled. Your father would be so proud. During lunch, Richard unexpectedly appeared. Sorry to interrupt, Commander, but I needed to deliver this personally. It was a letter signed by dozens of residents from the neighborhood where he worked on the community project. We want to express our gratitude for Warrant Officer Richard's transformation. From our greatest fear, he has become our protector. Anthony was moved. Richard was too. I never thought I'd see this, Richard said. People thanking me instead of fearing me. That's the power of real change, Grace replied. But the celebration didn't last long. The next day, a major crime shook the region. A heavily armed gang robbed a bank. The pressure for tough action was immediate. Now we'll see if this peace and love police force actually works, Reynolds posted on social media. Anthony organized the operation personally. It would be the biggest test of his methods. Gentlemen, let's act with intelligence, not brutality, he instructed the team. Commander, they're armed, Major Taylor reminded him. So are we. But our greatest weapon is strategy. The operation was meticulous. Using tips from the community, which now cooperated, they located the hideout. We'll try negotiation first, Anthony decided. Negotiate with criminals? Some questioned. Negotiate to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Richard led the negotiation team. After tense hours, 3 of the 5 robbers surrendered. The other 2 tried to flee, leading to a shootout. One was wounded and arrested, while the other initially escaped. Commander, let's comb the hills in a full-scale sweep, someone suggested. Negative. We'll use intelligence, not brute force. With the community's help, the last robber was located and arrested without further violence. The operation was a success, but the media focused on how long it took. Politically correct police take 48 hours to arrest gang, read one headline. Anthony remained unfazed. It took 48 hours and everyone is alive. How many quick operations end in tragedy? Colonel Thompson called him. Anthony, I'm under pressure to replace you. I understand, Colonel. But I won't give in. Your work is revolutionary. Keep going. The Colonel's support was crucial. Anthony doubled his efforts. Richard, now respected in the community, became a bridge between the police and residents. During a neighborhood festival, he was approached by Mark, the young man who had confronted him months earlier. "Warrant officer, I wanted to apologize for what I said." "No need, Mark. You had every reason to distrust. It's just, you saved my brother the other day." "Saved him?" "He was on the wrong path. You talked to him, showed him another way. Now he's in a vocational course." "I'm glad. That's why we're here. You know, I never thought I'd say this to an officer, but thank you." These small victories multiplied, but Anthony knew the war was far from over. Reynolds, increasingly resentful, worked behind the scenes. He secured support from conservative politicians to propose legal changes that would limit the autonomy of commanders like Anthony. "He wants to tie my hands," Anthony discussed with his team. "We need to rally support too," Ann Parker suggested. A political battle began. On one side, those who defended order through force. On the other, those who believed in transformation. Anthony went on radio shows, gave interviews, and presented data. "We're not going easy on criminals," he explained. "We're being tough on crime and fair to people." Richard stood by him, witnessing his own transformation. "I was living proof. The old system didn't work," he said. "It created more anger than safety." The debate divided the city. Protests from both sides erupted. During a rally supporting Anthony, Mrs. Rose, who had confronted him at the community event, took the microphone. "This commander did in 1 year what others couldn't in decades. He gave us hope." On the other side, merchants led by Parker demanded a firm hand. Tensions peaked when a verbal clash broke out between the groups. Anthony stepped in personally. "Gentlemen, we all want safety. The question is how to achieve it." "By cracking down on thugs," someone shouted. "And who decides who's a thug?" Anthony challenged. "The officer on the street." "Based on what? Skin color, clothes?" The silence was telling. "I nearly destroyed an honest man because of prejudice," Richard spoke up. "How many innocents have we destroyed thinking they were guilty?" The debate continued for weeks. The proposed law was voted on, and by a narrow margin rejected. Anthony won this battle, but he knew others would come. At home, Melissa hugged him. "I'm proud of you. It's not over yet, Melissa." "It never is. But every day you plant seeds of change." In his second year of command, the results were undeniable. The battalion became a model, receiving visits from across the state. Richard was promoted to lieutenant, taking over the coordination of the community policing program. "Lieutenant, you deserve it," Anthony said at the ceremony. "Commander, 2 years ago I humiliated you. Today I am who I am because of you." "No, Richard, it's thanks to your courage to change." But success attracted envy. Other commanders, feeling diminished, began to sabotage. Information from Anthony's battalion was leaked. Operations were disrupted. "They're trying to make us fail," Ann Parker was outraged. "Let them try," Anthony replied. "Our work speaks for itself." One day, during a joint operation, the sabotage became clear. Crucial information wasn't shared. Anthony confronted the responsible commander. "Commander Smith, your omission put my men at risk." "I don't know what you're talking about, Johnson." "Yes, you do, and it stops here." "Or what? You're going to lecture me on human rights?" "No, I'll document everything and send it to the General Command." Smith backed down. He knew Anthony was right and had proof. The situation created tension within the force. Anthony was respected by many, but hated by some. During a graduation ceremony for new officers, Anthony was invited to speak. "You're entering a noble profession," he began, "but one that's been distorted by years of misguided practices." Some senior officers shifted uncomfortably. "You can choose. Be part of the problem or the solution. Be feared or respected. Oppress or protect. I chose wrong for 30 years. Richard was in the audience. "Don't make my mistake. Start right." The speech went viral. Young officers began seeking out Anthony's battalion to serve. "We want to learn the right way," they said. This sparked a movement. The new police gained followers, especially among the younger generation. Reynolds, desperate as his influence waned, tried one last strike. He fabricated a complaint that Anthony was being lenient with drug dealers. An investigation was opened. Anthony had to defend himself. "These are baseless accusations," he told the investigator. "I know, Commander. but I have to follow protocol. For weeks, Anthony was investigated, every action scrutinized, every decision questioned. Richard and other officers testified in his favor. Commander Johnson is the most upright officer I've known, Richard declared. But weren't you close to Captain Reynolds? The investigator asked. I was, until I realized he represented everything wrong with the police. The investigation concluded. Anthony was cleared, Reynolds exposed for false accusations. The truth always wins, Melissa said. Not always, my love. But this time it did. The scandal strengthened Anthony. Even opponents acknowledged Reynolds' dirty tactics. In his third year of command, structural changes took place. Anthony's model was adopted as a pilot in other battalions. Richard traveled giving lectures, sharing his journey of transformation. At one lecture, he was confronted by a veteran sergeant. Lieutenant, you betrayed police values. What values? Richard asked. Oppressing the poor, humiliating black people. Those should never have been our values. You know what I'm talking about, I do. The old culture where police had to be feared. I lived it, and it was wrong. The discussion grew heated, but Richard remained calm. Sergeant, how many years have you been on the force? 28. How many friends do you have in the community you police? The silence was telling. I had none either. Now I have dozens. That's what real policing is. The changes weren't easy or quick. Resistance persisted, setbacks happened. One day, a new officer influenced by resistant veterans acted with brutality. Anthony called him. Officer Martin, what happened today? I thought he was suspicious. Based on what? He ran when he saw me. And why? Do you think he ran? The officer fell silent. Maybe because he learned to fear the police and you confirmed that fear. I'm sorry, Commander. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to the young man you hurt. Anthony accompanied the officer to the boy's home. His mother answered, wary. Ma'am, I came with Officer Martin. He wants to apologize. Apologize after hitting my son? I was wrong, Ma'am. The officer was visibly remorseful. I acted out of prejudice. The young man appeared with visible bruises. You hit me because I'm black, he accused. Yes, and I was wrong. Completely wrong. Anthony mediated the conversation. It was difficult, painful, but necessary. This can't happen. Again, said the mother. It won't, Anthony assured. The officer will undergo complete retraining. Leaving the house, the officer was shaken. Commander, I saw the fear in his eyes. Fear of me. How does that make you feel? Terrible. This isn't why I joined the police. Then there's hope for you. These moments of learning were constant. Every mistake, an opportunity to grow. Melissa watched her husband's journey with admiration and concern. You're changing lives, Anthony. Sometimes I wonder if it's enough. Social change takes generations. You're speeding up the process. Mrs. Grace, now 70, saw in her son the fulfillment of a dream. Your father always wanted a different kind of police, she said during lunch. You're building it. There's still a long way to go, Mum. But look at Richard. If he can change, anyone can. Richard, present at lunch, agreed. Mrs. Grace is right. I was the worst kind of officer. Now I sleep in peace. And your old colleagues? Asked Melissa. Some changed too. Others retired. A few still resist. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent call. There was a crisis. An armed man was holding his family hostage. Anthony and Richard rushed to the scene. What's the situation? Anthony asked upon arrival. Joseph Sanders, 45, unemployed, desperate, the sergeant on site reported. Threatening to hurt his family if evicted. Has anyone tried talking? Not yet, Commander. Richard, you're with me. Commander, it's dangerous, they warned. Everything in our job is dangerous, but talking is less dangerous than storming in. Anthony and Richard approached the house. Joseph, my name is Anthony. I'm the police commander. Can we talk? Go away. I'm not leaving. No, one's asking you to leave, Joseph. We just want to understand and help. Hours of negotiation followed. Richard used his street experience, Anthony his training in psychology. Joseph, I know you're desperate, Richard said, but hurting your family solves nothing. You don't understand. I'll lose everything. I do understand. Anthony was sincere. I've seen many men in your situation. can find help. Slowly, they built trust. Joseph began to open up. I lost my job, can't find another. They'll take my home, my dignity. No one can take your dignity, Joseph, and we'll fight for your home. You? Police? Why would you help? Because it's our job to protect and serve all citizens. After 5 hours, Joseph surrendered. No shots, no violence. How did you do it? The press asked. By treating him as a desperate human being, not an enemy, Anthony replied. The case became an example. It showed even extreme situations could be resolved without violence. But not everyone was impressed. Wasted 5 hours on a lowlife, Councilman Parker complained on his radio show. Would you rather we'd lost lives? Anthony responded in an interview. The debate continued, but the scale was tipping more and more toward Anthony's methods. In his 4th year of command, Richard was appointed to lead his own company. Lieutenant, your time has come, said Anthony. Commander, I don't know if I'm ready. You're more ready than I was when I took over here, but I have a past which makes you perfect to continue this transformation. Richard took command with humility and determination. In his inauguration speech, he was direct. I've known many of you for years, you know who I was. I hope you'll give me the chance to show who I've become. Most officers respected Richard's change, but there was resistance. Sergeant Collins, Richard's old partner from the days of brutality, confronted him. Richard, you've disappointed me. You've become a doormat for this hug-it-out policy. Collins, how many years have we worked together? 15. In how many of those years did you go home in peace, without guilt weighing on you? Collins fell silent. I never had peace. Collins, now I do. That's priceless. The following weeks were challenging for Richard. Implementing changes as a subordinate was one thing. As a commander, it was another. Team, we'll start with weekly meetings with community leaders, he announced. What for? Questioned a corporal. They just complain. They complain because they have reasons. We'll listen and improve. The first meetings were tense. Years of distrust don't dissolve easily. Lieutenant Richard? Mrs. Sylvia, a community leader, was skeptical. The same one who disrespected me 3 years ago. The same one who wronged you and now asks for a chance to make it right. Words are easy. Then judge me by my actions. Richard worked tirelessly. He patrolled personally, attended community events, listened to complaints. Anthony kept a close eye. How's it going, Richard? Hard, Commander. Now I understand what you went through. The resistance? Not just that. The weight of every decision, knowing it affects so many lives. Welcome to command, my friend. An incident tested Richard early. During a stop, one of his officers acted excessively. Richard had to decide, protect his subordinate or do what was right. Officer Lincoln, what happened here is unacceptable. Lieutenant, he resisted. Resisting an illegal stop isn't a crime. You had no reason to stop him. But Lieutenant, no buts, you'll be suspended for retraining. The decision divided the company. Some supported it, others called it betrayal. Richard faced the internal dissent firmly. I know some think I betrayed a colleague, but protecting a mistake isn't loyalty, it's complicity. Gradually, through consistent actions, Richard earned respect. Anthony received positive reports. Your protege is doing well, commented Colonel Thompson. Richard isn't my protege. He's proof anyone can change. You've started a movement, Anthony. I didn't start anything. I just showed another way is possible. In his 5th year of command, Anthony was invited to lecture at universities on humanized public safety. During one lecture, a criminology professor challenged him. Commander, your methods are idealistic. Crime is fought with force. Professor, force without intelligence is brutality, and brutality breeds more violence. Data shows zero tolerance works. Data from where? How many innocents does that data account for? The debate grew heated, but Anthony kept his composure. A student raised her hand. Commander, my brother was killed by the police. Mistaken for a criminal. How do you handle that? Silence filled the auditorium. Miss, no words can erase your pain, but I can promise I work every day so other families won't suffer the same. Promises won't bring my brother back. No, they won't. But they can prevent other brothers from being lost. Tears filled the young woman's eyes, and Anthony's. After the lecture, she approached him. "Commander, thank you for not making empty excuses. What was your brother's name?" Raphael Smith. He was 19. "Raphael won't be forgotten. I'll use his story in my trainings if you allow it." "Please do. Let it serve." Hey, purpose. Anthony kept his promise. Raphael's story became a case study in the training sessions. Richard, upon learning of it, implemented the same in his company. "Everyone, I want you to meet Raphael Smith." He showed the photo. "Killed by mistake, by prejudice." The officers were shaken seeing the young face, the dreams cut short. Every time you think of judging by appearance, remember Raphael. The changes created ripples. Other battalions began adopting similar practices, but they also stirred backlash. Conservative politicians organized. In the municipal elections, public safety became the central issue. Candidates were split between supporting the Johnson model or calling for a return to order. Anthony remained publicly neutral, but faced attacks from both sides. "Johnson is the future of the police," some said. "Johnson destroyed the police," others claimed. At home, the stress took its toll. "Anthony, you've lost more weight." Melissa was worried. "It's the campaign, love, being used as a symbol of both the best and the worst." "You're not a symbol. You're a person doing your job. Tell that to the politicians." The Conservative candidate, Dr. Armstrong, made law and order his slogan. "If elected, I'll end this peace and love police nonsense." His rallies drew crowds demanding a firm hand. On the other side, candidate Marina Lewis pushed to expand the model. Anthony Johnson proved that safety and respect go hand in hand. Anthony was pressured to take a stand. "Commander, the people want to know your opinion," reporters surrounded him. "My opinion is in my work. The numbers speak for themselves." "But who do you support?" "I support anyone who stands for a professional and humane police force." The diplomatic answer satisfied no one but preserved his integrity. Richard faced similar pressures on a smaller scale. "Lieutenant, if Dr. Armstrong wins, we're done for," his subordinate said. "Our work doesn't depend on who's in charge. We do what's right always." But he promised to end all this. Campaign promises are one thing, reality is another. The election was tight. Marina won by a narrow margin. Anthony breathed a sigh of relief, but knew the victory was fragile. "The fight continues," he told Melissa. "When doesn't it?" Marina approached Anthony after taking office. "Commander, I want to expand your model citywide. May a change of this scale takes time. We have 4 years. With all respect, it'll take longer. This is cultural change, not just procedural." "Then let's start now." Anthony was named coordinator of the police transformation program. He'd keep command of his battalion, but now influenced the entire structure. Richard became his right-hand man in the effort. "We'll face multiplied resistance," Anthony warned. "I'm ready, Commander. Learned from the best." "No, Richard. We learned together." The program began with training multipliers. So officers from various battalions came for instruction. The resistance was palpable. "This is ideological indoctrination," a major accused. "It's professionalization," Anthony replied. "Ideological is thinking skin color determines character." The debates were intense but necessary. Richard tirelessly shared his own story. "I resisted too, thought it was a betrayal of police values. Then I realized I was betraying human values. Some were moved, others dug in harder." A veteran sergeant confronted him. "Lieutenant, you've become a celebrity, forgotten the real streets." "Sergeant Nelson, how many years have you been on the streets?" 32. "I've got 35. I've forgotten nothing, just learned what they never taught me, which is that our uniform is to protect everyone, not oppress some." The program advanced slowly. Every small victory was celebrated, every setback analyzed. Anthony created a mentorship system. Transformed officers would guide the resistant ones. "Change from within is more effective," he explained. Richard mentored Sergeant Collins, his former partner. Richard, I still don't get it. We were unbeatable. We were feared, Collins. That's not the same thing. So what? Criminals should be afraid. And what about the innocent people who were also afraid? Was it worth it? Collins began questioning old certainties. During a joint patrol, they witnessed a familiar scene. Young black men standing on a street corner. Collins wanted to approach them immediately. Wait, said Richard, observe first, but trust me. They watched for minutes. The young men were clearly waiting for someone. Soon an elderly woman appeared. One of the young men was her grandson, helping with groceries. If we had approached them, Collins reflected, we would have humiliated a grandson helping his grandmother. Why? Because of prejudice. Collins stayed silent for the rest of the patrol. These hands-on experiences were more effective than 1,000 lectures. Anthony received encouraging reports. A 10% drop in complaints. This quarter, Mary informed him. It's progress, but still not enough. Rome wasn't built in a day, nor destroyed in one, but prejudice took centuries to build. The work continued, each day a small battle. Mrs. Grace watched with pride. Son, you've fulfilled your father's dream. Not yet, Mom. When no young person has to fear the police because of their skin color, then I will. In the 6th year, a milestone, Richard was promoted to captain. Captain Richard, Anthony honored him from humiliator to humanizer. Commander, this journey began when you gave me a chance instead of revenge. And you took it. That's your merit. Richard's promotion symbolized change. Once a symbol of the old police force, he now led the new one. But challenges remained. A new criminal group emerged, testing the humanized methods. They think you're weak, they taunted on social media. The pressure for a harsh response was immense. Commander, we need to show strength, Andy Sum insisted. We will. Strength of character, strategy, and unity with the community. The operation was meticulously planned. Intelligence, not brutality. With tips from the community, they located the leaders. The arrests were clean, without excess. Even conservative media had to acknowledge the efficiency. See? Anthony told the team. Professionalism always beats brutality. The real test came when they discovered one of the criminals was the son of an officer in the precinct. Sergeant Adams was devastated. Commander, I failed. My son... Sergeant, everyone makes their own choices. You didn't fail. But how did I not see it? How could my son... Richard stepped in. Adams, my son almost went down the wrong path when I was the old Richard. Don't blame yourself. The situation was delicate. How could they arrest a fellow officer's son while keeping their humanity? Anthony oversaw it personally. Sergeant, do you want to be there? I don't know if I can, Commander. I'll go, Richard offered. I know what it's like to have family on the wrong side of the law. The arrest was painful but dignified. The young man was treated with respect, his father supported by his colleagues. This is the new police, Anthony said afterward. Humane even in pain. The case made waves. It showed the law applied to everyone, but with compassion. Years of work culminated in national recognition. The New York City model became a reference. Anthony was invited to Washington, D.C. to present the program, but he declined. My place is here on the ground. But Commander, it's a chance to expand nationally, Mary insisted. Mayor, real change happens from the bottom up, not the top down. Richard agreed. The Commander's right. Every transformed officer transforms 10 more. The work continued day after day. No spotlight, no awards, but with results. In the 7th year, Anthony faced his greatest personal crisis. During a routine operation, he was wounded by a desperate young man. Commander! Richard was the first to arrive. I'm fine, don't let them hurt the boy. Even injured, Anthony shielded the attacker from the officer's anger. At the hospital, Melissa was crying. You could have died, but I didn't, and neither did the young man. That matters. The young man, Derek, was detained but unharmed. Why did he protect me? He asked the officers. I shot him. Because he's different, Richard replied. Do you want to talk to him? Would he even want to see me? Let's find out. Anthony received Derek in the hospital. Why did you shoot me, son? I thought you were going to kill me. Police always... Always what? My brother died. Police said he resisted. He was unarmed. Anthony understood. Another Raphael. I'm sorry about your brother, but shooting me won't bring him back. I know. I just was angry. Anger, I understand. But turn it into something positive. How? Help change the system that killed your brother, from the inside or the outside. Derek left transformed. Years later, he would become a human rights lawyer. Anthony's recovery was long. Richard temporarily took command. I won't let you down, Commander. It's not my trust that matters, Richard. It's the community's. Richard led with the same philosophy. The transformation had already taken deep root. During Anthony's absence, there was an attempt to roll back progress. New conservative politicians tried to reverse the policies. While Johnson recovers from protecting criminals, we'll restore order, they declared. Richard and the team resisted. Commander Johnson built a system, Richard argued publicly. Not a person, a system, and it works. The numbers didn't lie. Where the model was applied, violence dropped, trust rose. Anthony watched from the hospital, proud. Richard has grown, he told Melissa. You've created a successor. No, something better, a movement. After 3 months, Anthony returned. He was welcomed as a hero but rejected the title. Heroes are the officers who choose dialogue over force. The incident with Derek became a case study, showing even victims of police violence could forgive if they saw real change. In the 8th year, Richard faced a personal dilemma. His son Brian, now an officer, was assigned to his company. Captain, I don't want special treatment for being your son, Brian made clear. And you won't get it. In fact, I'll hold you to a higher standard. The dynamic was complex. Richard had to be both captain and father. During an operation, Brian made a judgment error, nearly assaulting a suspect. Richard had to act. Officer Brian, report to my office. Yes, sir. In the office, the conversation was tough. You disgraced the uniform today. Dad, I'm not your father. I'm your commander, and you failed. The suspect provoked me. So what? Since when does provocation justify violence? Brian left devastated. At home, the tension lingered. Richard, you were too harsh, his wife complained. If I go easy because he's my son, what example does that set? Anthony, aware of the situation, advised Richard. Remember when you resisted change? Brian is going through the same. But he grew up seeing my transformation. Seeing isn't living. He needs his own journey. Richard reflected and reached out to his son. Brian, let's talk. As father. And son now. I'd rather not, Captain. Please. They talked for hours. Richard shared his mistakes, his journey. Son, I was worse than you, much worse, but I changed. It's different, Dad. You didn't have an example. And having one creates more pressure. Everyone expects me to be perfect because I'm your son. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be fair. Brian began his own transformation, harder because of his father's name, more meaningful because of it. Meanwhile, the model faced another test. A massacre in a neighboring community reignited the debate on safety. Where was the peace and love police? Critics attacked. Anthony responded with facts. The massacre happened where our model wasn't implemented. Coincidence? The investigation revealed officers from the old guard were linked to the massacre. They weren't humanized officers. They were militia cops, Anthony exposed. The scandal strengthened the case for total transformation. Either we change the entire police force, or we'll have two, one that protects, another that kills, Richard argued. Pressure for rapid expansion grew, but Anthony remained cautious. Haste leads to superficial change. We need deep transformation. By the 9th year, international recognition arrived. The UN cited the model as an example. Anthony declined invitations to speak abroad. My work is here. Others can carry the message. Richard went in his place, representing the possible transformation. In New York, at the UN headquarters, the once brutal sergeant spoke about human rights. If I could change after 30 years of prejudice, any institution can. The speech moved many. The video went viral worldwide. Back in the United States, Richard met with Anthony. "Commander, people overseas are impressed with our work." "That's good. But what matters more is what our community thinks." "The community?" "Today, Mrs. Rose hugged me on the street." "The same one you humiliated?" "The same. She said, 'She's forgiven me completely.' That's worth more than any international award." The years of work took their toll. Anthony, now 51, felt the exhaustion. "Maybe it's time to pass the torch," he confided to Melissa. "You still have so much to give. Or maybe I've given enough. Richard is ready." The succession became a topic of speculation. Many wanted Anthony to stay in command forever. Mrs. Grace, now 79, had a clear opinion. "Son, you planted the tree. Others can harvest the fruit. You think I should step down? I think you should leave at your peak, leaving a solid legacy." Anthony announced he would step down in a year. Time to consolidate everything. The news shook many. "Commander, you can't leave," subordinates pleaded. "I can and should. No one is irreplaceable." Richard was the natural successor but faced scrutiny. "The guy who humiliated his own commander is taking over?" some questioned. "That's exactly why he should," Anthony defended. "It proves change is possible." The final year was about consolidation. Every process documented, every practice recorded. Anthony created a complete manual on police transformation. "So others won't have to start from scratch," he explained. Richard observed everything, learning the administrative aspects of command. "It's a huge responsibility, Commander." "You're ready, Richard." "More than I was." The transition was carefully planned. Nothing would be lost. During this time, one case deeply marked them both. Julius, the young man Richard had humiliated years earlier, came to the precinct. "Captain Richard, I don't know if you remember me." Richard recognized him immediately. One of his worst encounters. "Julius, how are you?" "I came to thank you. Your change inspired me to turn my life around." Julius was now a social worker, helping at-risk youth. "When I saw the officer who humiliated me had changed, I realized I could too." Richard was moved. "Julius, forgive me for that day. I forgave you long ago. Now I work, so other kids don't go through what I did." Anthony witnessed the exchange. "See, Richard, your impact goes beyond what you imagine." "I learned from the best, Commander." "No, you learned from your mistakes and chose to change." Anthony's farewell ceremony was emotional. Hundreds attended. Officers, residents, officials. "Commander Johnson didn't just change a precinct," Mary spoke. "He changed a culture." Richard spoke last. 10 years ago, I humiliated this man on the street. Today, I call him my mentor and friend. If that's not proof his work succeeds, I don't know what is." Anthony, in his final speech, was simple. "I didn't do anything alone. Everyone here is part of this transformation. Keep going. The work never ends." As he handed command over to Richard, he whispered, "The responsibility is yours now, my friend. I won't let you down, Commander." "I know you won't." Anthony left to applause, but without nostalgia. The work would continue. At home, Melissa was waiting for him. "How do you feel?" "Fulfilled and tired." "What will you do now?" "Keep fighting, just in a different way." Anthony took over coordination of a police training institute. "I'll reach officers at the route," he explained. Richard, now the commander, maintained and expanded everything. On his first day, he made his intentions clear. Commander Johnson planted the seeds. "We'll cultivate and harvest." The resistance he'd face would be different. Many accepted Anthony, but doubted Richard. "Let's see if he can keep up the act," some whispered. Richard quickly proved it wasn't an act. He implemented new practices, always respecting the legacy while innovating. Brian, his son, was now one of the best examples of the new generation. Commander, can I lead the school outreach project?" "Officer Brian, submit a formal proposal." "Yes, sir." The professional relationship between father and son found balance. Mutual respect, no privileges. Brian's project brought police and students closer. "We want children to see officers as protectors, not threats," he explained. Anthony watched from afar, proud. "Richard is exceeding expectations," he told Grace. And you, son, happy with your choice? Very. Training new officers is planting the future. At the Institute, Anthony revolutionized the curriculum. Human rights aren't an extra subject. They're the foundation. Resistance existed, but it was weaker. New officers were more open-minded. Professor Johnson, how did you handle violent criminals? A cadet asked. First, not every suspect is a criminal. Second, violence breeds violence. Intelligence overcomes force. Anthony's classes were in high demand. Real stories impacted more than theories. Richard visited often. Commander, I need advice. I'm not your commander anymore, Richard. You always will be. How do I handle politicians trying to exploit our work? Keep your distance. Our work is technical, not political. The advice was invaluable. Their partnership continued in new ways. One day, Derek, the young man who had shot Anthony, appeared at the Institute. Professor Johnson, I've graduated with a law degree now. I wanted to thank you. Derek, what a joy. And your plans? Public defense, defending those who have no defense. Your brother would be proud. You saved my life that day, not physically, but you did. These encounters reaffirmed to Anthony that the path was right. Richard faced new challenges as commander. Organized crime tried to regroup, testing the limits of humanized policing. Commander, they think we're weak, intelligence reported. Then we'll show them they're wrong. Prepare an operation, but on our terms. The operation was surgical. No brutal raids, no collateral damage. Leaders arrested. Structure dismantled. Community unharmed. How did you manage it? The press asked. Intel from a community that trusts us, Richard explained. That's real power. The success solidified Richard as a respected commander. Anthony watched the news with satisfaction. He learned well, Melissa remarked. No, he surpassed me. He's doing better than I did. The transformation started years ago was now irreversible. New battalions voluntarily adopted the model. It's more efficient, commanders admitted, and more rewarding. Richard created a network of humanized commanders. Alone, we're islands. Together, we're a continent. Monthly meetings shared experiences and solutions. Anthony was a frequent special guest. What began with a street confrontation became a statewide movement, he reflected. On the 10th year since the initial incident, a major event was organized. Decade of transformation would bring together everyone involved in the change. Richard coordinated it personally. Commander Anthony, we want you to open the event. Richard, you're the commander now. And I've learned that humility means recognizing who paved the way. The event was moving. Testimonies from transformed officers, residents who benefited, lives saved. Mrs. Rose took the stage. 10 years ago, I was humiliated by then Sergeant Richard. Today, he's my friend and the community's protector. Richard was visibly emotional. Mrs. Rose taught me more about policing than any manual. Raphael Smith was honored posthumously. His sister spoke. My brother's death wasn't in vain. It sparked change that saved others. Anthony, when he spoke, was simple and direct. 10 years ago, I was humiliated by prejudice. I could have used power for revenge. I chose to use it for transformation. Today, I see it was the right choice. The event marked not an end, but a renewal of commitment. In the following months, expansion accelerated. The state government, pressured by results, formalized the model. It's no longer an experiment, it's official policy, the governor announced. Anthony was appointed Deputy Secretary of Police Training. I accept on one condition, full autonomy over the curriculum. Granted. Richard remained in operational command, now with more resources. Commander, we're making history, Brian remarked to his father. No, officer, we're making justice. The relationship between father and officer's son grew stronger, both professionally and personally. Brian led a new generation, even more aware. We didn't have to unlearn prejudice, he explained. We learned right from the start. This generational difference was hope for the future. Anthony, in his state role, faced bigger challenges. Secretary, some municipalities resist implementation. Naturally, change is scary. We'll be patient. The strategy was to train local multipliers, not impose from above. Every city has its reality. The principle is universal, the application is local. Richard visited resistant towns, sharing his experience. Gentlemen, I was the worst of the worst. If I changed, anyone can. Personal testimony broke resistance, are better than orders. One day Reynolds, the once resistant captain, sought Anthony out. Johnson, I need to talk to you. Reynolds? After all these years, I was wrong. Completely wrong. What changed your mind? My grandson. He was roughly approached. I saw the fear in his eyes. I understood everything. It's never too late to change, Reynolds. Do you think Richard would forgive me? I was cruel to him. Only one way to find out. The meeting between Richard and Reynolds was tense but productive. Captain Reynolds, Mr. Reynolds, Richard, I came to ask for forgiveness for everything. The past is past. What matters is the future. Can I help somehow? Make amends? You can. Use your influence with the old guard. Help them understand. Reynolds became an unlikely ally, convincing resistors. If I, who led the opposition, changed my mind, so can you. Reynolds' conversion was symbolic. It showed no one was beyond. Redemption. Anthony reflected on the journey in a conversation with Grace, now 85. Mom, sometimes it feels like a dream. From humiliated to transformative. It wasn't a dream, son. It was a choice. You chose love over hate. You and Dad taught me that. We planted the seed, you grew a forest. On the 12th year, a historic milestone, Richard was promoted to lieutenant colonel. From prejudice sergeant to humanist lieutenant colonel, Anthony toasted. What a journey. It's not over yet, Richard replied. As long as a young person fears police because of their skin color, there's work to do. Richard's promotion inspired a whole generation of officers. If he could do it, so can we, they said. Brian, now a sergeant, led expanded community programs. Hey Dad, we received the National Award for Police Community Integration. The award is a consequence. Stay focused on the work. I learned from you. Recognition is good, but results are better. The New York City model has become an international case study. Delegations came to study it. Anthony received them all at the Institute. The secret isn't technique. It's a shift in mindset. But how do you change a deeply rooted mindset, they'd ask? With patience, example, and above all, never giving up on the resistant ones. Richard would compliment during practical visits. Come see our toughest neighborhoods. Where there was war, there's now peace. The numbers impressed. 70% reduction in police violence, 80% increase in community trust. These numbers are impossible, some doubted. They were. Until we proved otherwise, Richard would reply. One particular case moved everyone. Marcus, a young man Richard almost wrongfully arrested years ago, became an officer. Commander Richard, I came to thank you. You changed my life. Marcus, you became an officer. Yes, to be like you are today, not like you were. That moves me deeply. I want to be part of the change. Can I serve under your command? It'd be an honor, Officer Marcus. The circle was complete. Potential victims became agents of transformation. But not everything was smooth sailing. New challenges arose constantly. Militias tried to infiltrate. Organized crime adapted. Commander, they're changing tactics, intelligence warned. So do we, always one step ahead. The model's adaptability was its strength. It wasn't rigid. It was principle applied with flexibility. Anthony constantly developed new curricula. Each class is different. Teaching must keep up. Professor, don't you ever get tired? An assistant asked. I do, but I remember the young man humiliated on the street, and I find new energy. Melissa stood by her husband, now closer with a less dangerous routine. You look younger now than when you commanded the battalion. That's because now I train. Hundreds of Anthonys and Richards, multiplied impact. In the 13th year, Grace fell seriously ill. Anthony split his time between work and caring for his mother. Son, I'm proud. You've honored our name. Mom, don't talk like that. You'll get better. Anthony, my time is coming, but I'll leave in peace seeing your work. Richard visited often. Mrs. Grace, you're the heart grandmother. Curve hundreds of transformed officers. Richard, take care of my son. You're more than colleagues, you're brothers in cause. I promise, Mrs. Grace. Grace passed peacefully, surrounded by love. At the funeral, hundreds attended. Officers, residents, officials. She saw her son achieve the impossible, Richard spoke, and taught us that love transforms more than force. Anthony, moved, thanked the support. My mother used to say, we plant for future generations. Let's keep planting. The loss strengthened everyone's commitment even more. Months later, a new challenge arose. A government change brought pressure for setbacks. This humanized police business doesn't win votes, the new secretary pressured. Anthony resisted. The data proves otherwise. Where there's real security, there's public support. But it takes too long. We need quick results. Quick results are superficial. Real transformation takes time. Richard faced similar pressures in operations. Commander, they want us to toughen up, officers reported. Stay firm. In your principles. Results speak for themselves. Organized resistance prevented major setbacks. Communities rallied in support of the model. We won't allow the return of brutal policing, they chanted in protests. Popular support was decisive. Politicians backed down. Could see? Anthony remarked to Richard, when you plant right, the community defends the harvest. The work continued, strengthened by the crisis. In the 14th year, Brian made a bold proposal. Dad, I want to create the first unit fully trained. In the new model, ambitious, present a full proposal. Brian worked for months on the project. Richard oversaw it as a commander, not a father. Officers selected from the academy, specialized training, constant mentorship, approved. Lead it yourself. Thank you, Commander. Don't thank me. Prove it works. Brian's unit became a model within the model. Young officers competed for spots. This is the future of the police, so they said. We want to be part of it. Anthony attended the graduation of the first class. You carry no bad habits. You're a blank page. Write a beautiful story. The success was evident. 0 abuse incidents, maximum efficiency. How do you do it? Veterans asked. Simple, Brian explained. We never learned the wrong way. We don't have to unlearn. The generational difference created an interesting dynamic. Transformed veterans mentored rookies, learning too. They teach. Ask the ideal. We teach them reality. Richard philosophized. In the 15th year, definitive recognition arrived. The National Human Rights Award for the program. Anthony wanted to refuse. We don't do this for awards. But the award validates the work, Mary, still the mayor, argued. Accept it for the cause. At the ceremony, Anthony shared the stage with Richard. This award belongs to every officer who chose to change, Anthony said in his speech. Richard went further. It belongs especially to the victims of our past brutality, who forgave us and allowed transformation. Mrs. Rose was in the audience, applauding tearfully. The award brought definitive national visibility. States began adopting the model, adapting it to local realities. Don't copy. Be inspired and create your own path, Anthony advised. That same year, tragedy tested them all. Brian was seriously injured in an operation. Richard rushed to the hospital, torn between father and commander. How's my son? Stable, Commander, but it was serious. Anthony arrived soon after. Richard, stay strong. Brian is as tough as his father. What if I lose him, Anthony, because of this job? Don't lose faith now. Brian chose this path. The recovery was long. Brian survived, but with lasting effects. Dad, I can't be a street officer anymore. Son, you can be so much more. A teacher, a trainer, an inspiration. Brian reinvented himself. He became the lead instructor for the new generation. I turned limitation into opportunity, he said in his classes. I learned from the best. Brian's resilience inspired the entire force. Anthony saw in him the future of the movement. Richard, your son is special. I learned from you. Everyone is special. They just need opportunity. In the 16th year, Richard received a very tempting offer. Commander, they want you in Washington, D.C., National Command. My place is here, but you could expand nationally. Anthony taught me, real change is local. National is the consequence. His decision to stay strengthened his leadership further. He could have been in Washington, D.C. He chose to stay with us, officers remarked. Loyalty bred loyalty. The battalion grew even more united. Anthony, nearing mandatory retirement, prepared his succession at the Institute. I want someone who understands. Training is more than teaching. It's transforming. Brian was the natural choice. Professor Brian has a unique pedigree, Anthony argued. A son of transformation, a victim of violence, an example of resilience. The appointment was unanimous. Professor Johnson, it's an honor to succeed you. Brian, you're not succeeding me. You're evolving the work. The transition was smooth. Brian introduced innovations while respecting the foundations. In the 17th year, the cycle completed unexpectedly. During a routine patrol, Richard encountered a young man acting suspiciously. Something familiar in his face made him pause. Young man, everything all right? Why are you hassling me? 'Cause I'm black? No. Because you remind me of someone. What's your name? John Charles. Why? John Charles what? John Charles Johnson Smith. Richard froze. He was Anthony's nephew, the son of a distant cousin. You're related to Commander Anthony Johnson. He's my uncle, but I barely know him. Young man, let's talk. Your uncle changed my life. The conversation revealed a young man at a crossroads, almost turning to crime. Richard acted as Anthony had with him, with humanity. Your uncle gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it. Let me return the favor. John Charles resisted at first, but Richard persisted. He took the young man to meet Anthony. Uncle, you're really the famous commander? I'm your uncle, the rest is the result of choices. My mother says you abandoned the family. I didn't abandon them. I stepped away from the part that couldn't accept my choices. The reunion was tense but productive. John Charles discovered a story his family had hidden. Why did no one ever tell me you were a hero? I'm not a hero. I just did what was right. And you can. 2. Richard took John Charles under his wing, getting him off the streets. Commander, it's the least I can do. Richard, you owe me nothing. I owe you everything. My transformation, my redemption. John Charles joined a youth apprenticeship program. Later inspired, he became a human rights lawyer. The circle expanded. Every life touched others. Anthony reflected on the power of example. One act of humanity 17 years ago created waves that still ripple today. In the 18th year, Richard faced a tough decision. A retirement offer came. He could leave at his peak. Melissa, what do you think? Richard, you love what you do. Age is just a number. But Anthony left at the right time, and you'll know your time. It's not now. Richard decided to stay. There was still work to do. A new generation of criminals, more sophisticated, challenged their methods. Commander, they used technology, social media. Then we evolved too. Brian, I need your expertise. Brian developed a program for humanized digital policing. Same principles, new tools. Constant adaptation kept the model relevant. Anthony, retired but active, wrote a book about the experience. I want to document this for future generations. Dad, can I help? Brian offered. Of course. Your perspective will enrich it. Father and son worked together. 3. Generations of transformation. The book, From Humiliation to Humanization, became a bestseller. Readers were moved by the real journey of change. If they could do it, there's hope, the comments said. Richard read it with emotion. Anthony, you've immortalized our story. Not ours, Richard. Everyone who chose to change. In the 19th year, the final test came. A major operation against a new criminal faction was needed. Pressure for traditional methods was intense. Commander, this time we need force. Haven allies said. Richard stood firm. Force, yes, but smart, not brute. The operation was planned for months. Intelligence, not invasion. When executed, it was surgical. Leaders arrested, no civilian casualties. How do you do it? International media asked. Decades of building trust, Richard explained. The community is our ally, not enemy territory. The definitive success silenced the last critics. The model was no longer an experiment. It was the new reality. In the 20th year, a grand celebration was held. 2 decades since the incident on the street. Anthony and Richard shared the E stage once more. 20 years ago, I humiliated him, Richard began. And I chose to turn pain into purpose, Anthony finished. Today, we're living proof that hate doesn't conquer love, that prejudice can be overcome, that people can change, that institutions can evolve. The audience, filled with transformed lives, erupted in applause. Mrs. Rose, now 89, was honored. I've seen the worst and the best of the police. Today, I see only the best. Brian spoke about the new generation. We're the fruit of the courage of those who came before. We'll honor the legacy. John Charles, now a lawyer, thanked them publicly. Uncle Anthony and Commander Richard saved my life, literally and figuratively. Marcus, the young man who became an officer, was now a lieutenant. I learned that real police protect everyone without distinction. Derek, who had shot Anthony, was a respected public defender. The commander taught me that anger can be turned into justice. Every testimony was proof of the multiplied impact. Melissa, standing beside Anthony, whispered, "Every sacrifice was worth it." It was, and it still is. The work continues. Marina, in her final term, made a surprise announcement. We're creating the Johnson Miller Institute for Humanized Security. Anthony and Richard were moved. Mayor, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. A legacy must endure. The institute would ensure continuity, independent of governments. Reynolds, completely transformed, would be one of the directors. I want to dedicate my remaining years to repairing the harm I caused. Reynolds' redemption symbolized that it's never too late. At the end of the event, a magical moment happened. A choir of children from the community sang. Among them were grandchildren of officers and residents united. This is the real victory, Anthony remarked, the next generation without fear or hatred. Richard agreed. We planted well. The harvest will be theirs. After the event, in a private moment, Richard sought out Anthony. Anthony, I need to say something. Go ahead, my friend. You saved my soul. I was a monster and didn't know it. Richard, you saved yourself. I just held up the mirror. Don't downplay it. You could have destroyed me. You chose to rebuild me. The two embraced, overcome with emotion. 20 years of a shared journey, from oppressor and victim to brothers in cause. Melissa and Richard's wife watched. They changed an entire state, Melissa commented. They changed more. They changed hearts. Brian approached. Dad, Professor Anthony, you're an inspiration every day. You're the future, Brian. Do better than we did. Impossible, but I'll try to honor the legacy. The evening ended with renewed commitment. The work of transformation never ends. Every day is a chance to plant seeds. In the weeks that followed, life returned to its normal rhythm, but normal now was extraordinary compared to 20 years ago. Richard led with hard-earned wisdom. Anthony guided at the Institute. Brian trained new humanized officers. John Charles defended victims of police abuse. Marcus protected the community that watched him grow. Derek fought for justice for the voiceless. Each, in their own way, carried on the transformation. During a routine meeting, Richard shared a reflection. You know what amazes me most, Anthony? What? How one moment of choice changed so many lives. It wasn't one moment, Richard. It was thousands of daily choices. True, choosing what's right when wrong is easier. Choosing to forgive when retaliation is instinctive. Choosing change when staying put is comfortable. Those are the choices that make the difference. The two continued working side by side, different roles, same purpose, turning the police into a true force for protection. On his last day before vacation, Richard received a letter. Unknown sender, shaky handwriting. Commander Richard, you probably don't remember me. 25 years ago, you approached me violently. I was 16, I never forgot. For years, I hated the police, I hated you. I taught my children to fear uniforms, but I followed your transformation. I watched your talks. I read about your work. Today, I write to say I forgive you, and I ask forgiveness for passing on hatred. My grandson wants to be an officer, the kind you are today. He has my blessing. Thank you for proving people can change. Signed, a citizen who learned to forgive. Richard wept as he read it. He shared it with Anthony. See? The impact keeps revealing itself. How many lives have we changed without knowing, Richard? How many more will we change? As long as there's tomorrow, there's hope for change. The letter was framed, hung in Richard's office, a daily reminder of the power of transformation. At the end of the 20th year, the results were extraordinary. The entire state had adopted the humanized model. Police violence had dropped by 89%. Community trust had risen by 95%. Crime rates had fallen by 67%. But the numbers were only part of the story. The real story was in the transformed lives, in the youth who no longer feared the police, in the officers who slept in peace, in families reunited, not torn apart, in true justice, not brute force. Anthony, at 62, saw his legacy solidified. Richard, at 60, led with experience and humanity. Brian, at 33, represented a bright future. 3 generations united by a choice made on an ordinary afternoon, a choice to transform humiliation into humanization, to turn hatred into opportunity. To prove that change is possible. It's always possible. At home that night, Anthony hugged Melissa. "We did it, my love. You did it. I just supported you. Without you, I would have given up 1,000 times. Without you, the world would be worse." They fell asleep in peace. The peace of duty fulfilled, of a legacy built, of a future secured. The next morning, Anthony woke to a phone call. It was Richard, excited. "Anthony, you won't believe. It is what happened. I got an invitation. They want our model in South Africa." "Really?" "They want us to go together and present it." "Richard, it's your time to fly solo." "No, we built this together. We'll present it together." "Then let's go." Spread hope. The journey continued, from New York City to the world. A simple but powerful message. People can change, institutions can evolve. Love conquers hate, always. At the airport, boarding for their new mission, Richard paused. "Anthony, remember that day on the street. How could I forget? Thank you for choosing the hard path. Thank you for having the courage to change." They boarded side by side, from enemies to brothers, from problem to solution, from a dark past to a bright future. The transformation continued, one life at a time, one heart at a time, one day at a time, until no more youth lived in fear, until no more officers carried hatred, until there was only protection and justice for everyone, without exception. That was the legacy. That was the mission. That was the commitment of Anthony and Richard, of Brian and all the others, of every person who chooses to change, of every institution that chooses to evolve. The story began with humiliation. It continued with humanization, and it wouldn't end. As long as injustice existed, as long as prejudice remained, as long as there was hope, the transformation would continue. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're reading from. Do you agree that transformation is possible when we choose humanity over hate? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. Leave a like and subscribe for more inspiring stories.